Hey, welcome back to the Thompson Deep Dive channel. I'm going to take a little detour here this evening. I'm going to offer you something I rarely do. Well, okay. Now, I'm going to say this is the second book on my channel I've recommended to you. The first, of course, being the Thompson Chain Reference Bible, okay? This is the second I'd like to suggest to you. This is, as you can see, the cover says it all. The Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, the Holy Scriptures, the new JPS, Jewish Publication Society translation according to traditional Hebrew text, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. Now, if you want to impress your Jewish friends, the first thing you want to say, oh, the Tanakh. Well, isn't that actually an acronym for the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim? Yes, it is. In Hebrew, the word translated Tanakh is made up with well, if you look here, what do you got? You got a T, you got an N, and you got a K. Because remember, in Hebrew, there's no vowels. There's no separate vowels. Okay, that's a topic for another time, maybe. Okay, so anyways, you got the T for the Torah, the N for the Nevi'im, and the K for the Ketuvim. So you got K N K H. Okay, the Holy Scripture. That's from the Masoretic text, published date 1985, roughly 6 to 8 years after the publication of the full version of the Good News Bible, and I think that's important because I'll say that the language used here reminds me of the Good News Bible, which for me is not necessarily a bad thing. Anyway, the price, I got this for $25. It's on sale for like 40% off. Regular $39, hardcover, nice jacket cover. The typeface, as you'll see, is very nice, very easy to read. So anyway, so now we got the acronym out of the way. Let's just come into here. Let's start with the table. Look, now the first thing you're going to notice is it's odd, is that it goes from front to back and from left to right. Well, the Jewish tradition is back to front, right to left. Now, that being said, it does preserve the traditional Hebrew book order, meaning it begins with Genesis and ends with 2nd Chronicle. And there's a reason for that I'll get to in a few moments, okay, because it's kind of interesting. So anyway, go over here. This is what I want you to see, that the Torah, you got the Torah, Nevi'im, the prophets. Now, of course, the Jewish brothers would tell us, minor doesn't mean less important. It just means that they talked a lot. This means that they talk less than the major prophets, okay? And the writings: Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Song of Solomon, Ruth, Lamentation, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with Genesis chapter 1, and it reads like this. And again, I want to point out, here, let me center this back up. I want to point out that the typeface is very nice. It's a fairly comfortable font size, and it got nice white pages in the background. Okay, so this reads Genesis 1, verse 1, and maybe 2. When God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind formed, and the wind from God sweeping the waters. Now, if you look down here, of course, it's got the usual margin references. In the beginning, God, the Spirit of, one day, okay? Over the water, God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated light from the darkness. God called the day, the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning on the first day. Now, is there some meaning to the fact that goes from, let's say, instead of going from morning to evening, it goes from evening to morning? Kind of interesting, okay? So now we come back over here to Exodus, and I'll explain it in this. You'll understand why I say this is not a gender-friendly translation, okay? Genesis 15, verse 20. when Miriam the prophetess, so they're preserving the correct Hebrew gender for women and men. Because as you know, some modern translations will say, oh no, we can't say prophetess, we got to say prophet. Okay? So anyway, Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister. Now let's come all the way back. Take a look at a couple very common Psalms. Let me center this thing back up here, okay? And we begin here, and I think we're going to see some of the differences here between the more traditional text, more traditional Christian text. Psalm 1, verse 1. Happy is the man who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, or even the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather the teachings of the Lord is his delight, and he studies that teaching day and night. He is like the tree planted beside streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whatever it produces thrives. And what you notice here, there's a space, extra space between the righteous and the wicked, which is kind of interesting. Not so the wicked. Rather they that like chaff that wind that blows away. Therefore the wicked shall not survive judgment, nor will the sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord cherishes the way of the righteous, but the way of the wickedness is doomed. Now, of course, we can't read Psalms without reading Psalm 23, okay? The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me to water in a place of repose. And again, down in the margins, it has still waters, okay? He renews my life. He guides me in the right paths, as benefits his name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of darkness, shadow of death, the margin note says shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years. Now, I actually kind of like that translation. I actually kind of like this translation for the Tanakh in the Old Testament, okay? So finally, we're going to come to the question, why in Jewish tradition is 1st Chronicles, the last book of the Bible? And that question is answered in the last two verses of the last book of the Bible. So, 2nd Chronicles chapter 36, beginning with verse 22. And in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, with the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, was fulfilled, the Lord roused the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to issue a proclamation throughout his realm by word of mouth in writing as follows. Thus said King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord of heaven and earth, the Lord of the Jews of heaven and earth, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and has charged me, here you go, charged me with building him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. So God has commanded Cyrus, and Cyrus obeyed, to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And all of you, and any one of you, of all his people, all the Jews, the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. Go up to where? Go up to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And that is why this is the last verse of the last book in the Jewish Tanakh, because it ends with the promise of the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem.